Good evening and welcome. This is a meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, the 11th of September 2024, our first meeting of this school year. Welcome back. In accordance with Ontario Regulation 463-97 and guidelines effective February the 1st, 2021, HDSB promotes community engagement and participation by having processes in place for members of the public to ask questions. A Google form was attached to the agenda distributed in advance of the meeting and is also posted on the HDSB SEAC website page. Questions posed during live stream meetings of SEAC may be answered during the meeting, particularly those related to agenda items, or at the following meeting at the discretion of the chair. For efficiency, multiple questions received that are similar in nature may be grouped together at the discretion of the chair and/or vice chair. Questions will not be attributed. Notation will be made that multiple people ask the same question. Any questions that contain language that is hateful or discriminatory will not be considered. So first of all, as we get started, we're going to do a roll call to record who's in attendance. Please answer yes or present. Kate Lambacher.
Present.
Sarika Kanethi.
Sarika is no longer an alternate for ABC. We're currently looking to nominate someone new. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Amanda Winch.
Present.
Jennifer Laguerre.
Present.
Alison Brindle is present. Nadina Torek. Okay. Melissa Dockery.
Present.
Sarah Lansley sends her regrets. Sophia Siddiqui. Erin Ruppel. Erin Sproul sends his regrets. Kaiser Klaassen.
Present.
Katie Schleifer.
Present.
Trustee Ahmed. Trustee Baxter.
Present.
Trustee Olivia. Oh, Oliver. Yeah, sorry. Trustee Zhang.
Present.
Okay, and we have Superintendent Ruddock.
Present.
Principal Sprun.
Present.
And then we have some guests who will be joining Vice Principal Farrell Bangerter, and Kevin is here with our communications. Thank you. So first of all, we're going to start by honouring the land. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaran, the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honour and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. So first of all, we're going to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Everybody has received that. Are there any modifications or amendments that need to be made to the agenda? If you could indicate your wish to speak in the chat box or by raising your hand. Okay, would anybody like to move a motion to approve the agenda?
I will. Katie Schleifer.
Okay, we've got Katie Schleifer and Amanda. When did I see your hand to second?
Yep, I can second.
That's great. Thank you very much. Is there any opposition to the agenda as it stands? If there is, could you please indicate that now? None being seen, the agenda is approved unanimously. Next is the approval of our June the 4th, 2024 meeting minutes from last year. Are there any errors or omissions? Would anyone like to move a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, we have Melissa. Thank you very much. And would anybody like to second the motion? Okay, Trustee Baxter, thank you very much. Is there any opposition to the minutes as recorded? If so, please indicate that now. Okay, none being seen, the June 4th meeting minutes are approved unanimously. So now we're going to start with our action items. And we're very lucky today that we're going to have a presentation on visible values, data-informed planning for the Community Pathways Programme. Vice Principal Farrell Bangerter.
It may take me a moment just to make sure this works. I do have a slide deck.
Easiest way to do this is probably to have you go ahead and
That works. It's the one in the calendar, I assume.
Yep.
Great. Oh, then I can probably do it not standing here in front of small audience of in person. Suddenly feel a little bit awkward up here. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And turn it into an actual slideshow. There we go. Okay, so my name is Stacey Farrell, and I'm the Vice Principal for Special Education Services, and I have been before you. Turn it off. All right. The size of the call.
You want to turn that off?
I'll get there.
There we go.
I am a lot more competent when it comes to serving our students in CPP than I am getting up here for a presentation, it would appear. I have been before you previously around work and community pathways. It is very much a passion of mine. I think that we have some really amazing students that inspire a lot of good work in our schools. And in our role as leaders, especially in a school, it usually does take a couple of years to get to a place where you can get to the really fun stuff about instructional leadership, because there are a lot of things that have to be in place before that. And as a department, we are there with community pathways right now. And so in the spring, we decided to focus on how do we improve the instructional program and how do we develop instructional leadership in community pathways. And so really important to, I know my leadership style, and I see this in our department and the work we do, is starting with why. And at the center of that are our students. They deserve the best we have to offer, and that includes ongoing professional learning to make sure Community Pathways is keeping pace with the direction of the board. And so as a group, the CPP CCAs, which are the community assistants, so they are like the department heads of the Community Pathways program, and the administrator whose portfolio is CPP, we all got together and we looked at our why, how, and what for planning on how to do this work. So based on the work that day, it's a little bit of a lag, based on the work that day and all the data we collected, we developed this statement of why. This is at the heart of what we do. So we believe in the power of the collective effort to create communities that support student growth towards independence for life at 21. We achieve this through a growth mindset and a commitment to ongoing professional learning. This stance is visible in every Community Pathways program classroom through our relationships, integration, student skill development, and experiential learning. So this statement is very intentionally crafted. We need to prepare our students for life at 21. So we needed to capture that in there. This is why we do all the things we do in Community Pathways. But we achieve that through what we value. And what came out of the work that I'm about to share with you is that we value visibly, by walking into our schools, you can see that we value the relationships with students, integration, student skill development, and experiential learning. So we needed to make sure our values were stated in our why. To do that, we did an activity, and some of you may be familiar with this activity. It's not mine. I used the meeting guide and did a lot of work to make sure I understood it, but this is not a work original to me. We used the method to draw a toast. So the instruction, usually I get a few head tilts when I talk about this, but we brought everybody together and we gave them the instruction of draw a toast. There's a description there of what it is, a definition, so everybody has the same definition. It's absolute silence, and everyone's given 3 minutes to draw a toast. No one really knows why we're doing it, especially if you've never done it before. It confuses people a little bit, which is sometimes a good way to start something. And so once that was done, we placed our drawings on the wall, and then we looked at all of them. How are the illustrations similar? How are they different, or some clear? And what we saw and what consistently comes up is, we had someone draw Uber dropping off toast because they ordered it online. We had someone draw planting the grain, harvesting it, and bringing it to a supermarket where it became bread. We had people draw, taking bread out of the fridge. Other people take it out of a cupboard. Like the variations were quite incredible. And sort of the point of all of that is that no one person holds all the answers, and that we all have something that makes the picture complete. So how do we bring all of our various experiences of the same thing that we just defined as a very clear thing and yet interpreted differently? How do we bring that together to build something cohesive that can move forward? I'm not going to go into the TED Talk because that's a whole other thing, but then we watched the TED Talk, got a wicked problem. First, tell me how to make toast. So that's part of the process. Our wicked question that we asked our CPP administrators and CCAs was this: how is what we believe about our students' potential, regardless of perceived challenges or differences, visible in CPP? So that's a big question to answer. But that was our wicked question. Wicked being what is a really tough question to answer, not good. So the instructions, this is done in silence, and it's really interesting to watch people work. Conan and I did this with our IPLs around what is a special education services IPL, and having that group work in silence. It's really interesting how the thinking changes. So people took time to consider their own answers. They had sticky notes, and then you write it down, you get up, and you just place it anywhere. There is no rhyme or reason to where you are placing your ideas. And then you may be inspired some, it may make you think of more. You keep going back and forth until, as a facilitator, you sort of use your judgment to see if people have reached the end of that part of it. And then the next step is you silently start sorting them. So grouping them into familiar or themes that overlap, which again, done in silence, is really interesting to watch people communicate without words, which also served another purpose of a lot of our students don't necessarily have language, but they have a lot going on and they have a lot of thoughts. So how are they communicating? Just being aware of that piece of it as well. That was an added bonus. Then we got to the point where that, again, as a facilitator, you watch, okay, where are we in that? Then we start discussing it. And by then, all of this data has come together and it's all been generated by the people who do the work every day. So what did we do with that? Angela Sauve and I took all of those talking points back, all of those sticky notes back, and we found that ultimately it was all sorted into 4 values. We valued 4 things, these 4 things: relationship, integration, student skills and growth, and experiential learning. And none of those values were possible unless they were built on a foundation of good communication and deliberate staffing. Without those elements, we were finding gaps in those values being visible. Not to say they don't exist in people's hearts, but the heart isn't where the kids are learning. They're learning in the classroom. So we broke down, well, okay, good communication. A lot of people think we have good communication when in fact there's a lot of miscommunication. So we dug even deeper. So more, again, all of these points are coming from our 7 sites and the people who were there. None of this is top down. This is all collaborated together. So we came up with these definitions for good, or examples of good communication and deliberate staffing. As you can see, there are a lot of points there. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but it gave us a really clear starting place for some sites who really need to work on their communication, because when they did their own assessment of their site with all of their teachers, they realized, oh, maybe we aren't communicating as well as we thought we were, and this has to be our work before we can move on to the other things. So it really gave people a very purposeful and clear starting point for some of the work. What it also did was share with us what happens visibly under those values. So we can say relationships, but what does that look like on site? So there are 4 here. I'm going to look at 2 because I think I have the time, definitely 1, in depth with these links on what they look like. So we identified within those 4 values that student to educator back and forth, educator to educator, student to student, and CPP to school and community. And community involves parents, community involves perhaps community living. Our students are often tied to community resources. So we can't ignore that stakeholder in what we build in our schools. So I'm going to go into visible values relationships. I think I have to share this tab instead. So what it looks like when you dive in deeper on these links, which are available to anyone who has the link. So if anybody wants to look at these in more in depth afterwards, you are more than able to. So each one of these values, this template looks the exact same. We start with why, because the why is driving all of our work. If we can't answer how what we're doing supports our why, then we are not doing the right work at this time. And again, all of this work comes from our schools. So part of the point is there are gaps. That student to student column, that's a gap, which means that's where our work is. So there was a lot of realization that we thought we were doing things that maybe weren't translating to visible. Doesn't mean there aren't things happening, but if it's not visible, students may not experience it the way we intend. And then even some of the pieces that are there, for example, grad celebrations under student to educator and educator to student. That happens once a year. That's a great example. But if that's one of the only examples, that's not enough of positive relationships. So again, this value being relationships. Now this was collaborated from 7 sites, the department head and the admin. Once teams went back to their classrooms, some of these blanks were filled in by teachers who are doing things as well. So what? Okay, you did all this, what are you doing with it? That's the fun part that I really, really like planning and guiding. So we looked at our SIPSA goals and they were coming to an end. We will have new ones this year. Thematically, we felt confident that there would be similar themes. So instead of taking the SIPSA goals, which were a little bit challenging to fit in because they're based around Ontario curriculum, some of them, so we're using AFAC. So what we did was we adapted them to goal statements. So for example, we will increase the number of students who report feeling that their social identities are represented in their school. We will impact the quality of relationships between the identified stakeholders, those 4 groups are along the top, to support student growth towards independence. I'm in the wrong one. Growth towards independence. Sorry, I lost my space there. For life at 21, I'm not in the wrong one. The educator's actions to achieve this goal will be assessed for implementation and impact over 2024, 25, and 25, 26. So great, that's our statement. But without any educator actions, that statement doesn't hold a lot of weight. It would be like getting a nutrition plan that just says, eat differently starting tomorrow, right? That's not enough to go on if you're looking for actual change, because then we just fall back into our habits unless we have something to follow. So we've given some sample educator actions to uphold that goal or give schools a starting place. And within these sample educator actions, we are using the work that we've been doing around anti-colonial and anti-oppressive strategies in classrooms. So we are embedding that work in here. So it's not something separate. It is what we are working on. So for example, visibly value relationships through educators using perspective-taking tools and strategies such as social thinking, collaborative problem solving, and social detective to develop student thinking skills to improve social interactions in the classrooms and hallways. Or visibly value relationships through our resources. So again, educators can use budget to influence resources. We have an AP for the selection of instructional and library resources, but also from street data, using student-inspired questions to ponder what we have, and student voice to update instructional resources to reflect social identities and relatable life experiences. So we do find there is a lot of YouTube in community pathways for social stories, for lots of good things. Are we looking at who's represented in those videos? Do our students see themselves? Are those questions we're asking ourselves? And we need to be asking ourselves those things quite regularly. So these are examples. I've also put in here, implement the instructional strategies that support both universal design for learning and differentiated instruction in the de-streamed environment using the Learning for All document. Community Pathways needs to be a part of de-streaming. because our students all have a variety of abilities in different areas. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all in a classroom. The classrooms themselves, yes, sometimes they're streamed for general care needs, but those kids all have different abilities that we need to recognize and have differentiation for. So much like that nutrition plan, that without any content, it becomes just a statement that you fall back into the same old, monitoring and accountability is really important. Human nature really struggles with change. And when we're under pressure and under stress, we revert to what we know. It's just how we are wired. It's not always malicious. So what are the monitoring and accountability pieces? So in the collective agreement the year I started, not because of me, just good timing, there is a mandated meeting with the CCA and the administrator, myself and the IPL for Community Pathways, to ensure that the roles and responsibilities are clear. We discuss things like the APs and any other pressing issues that come up so we can resolve problems. Given that system structure, we've done a lot of work to get there. Now we can use that system structure to continue this work. So we plan to visit each other's sites for those meetings, do a walkthrough. What is the visible value you're working on? Show us what that looks like. Can we see it walking through? So there's that monitoring piece where we're sharing. We also have time on PD days. And today I've asked that our superintendents who oversee any schools with CPP come in, and I've provided them with some prompts, which I'm going to share here, to ask those questions so the superintendents know what to look for and ask as well. And then accountability, there are a variety of accountability pieces, including this committee. So there's one here about reflection questions and data, but the next one, presentations to SEAC from each CPP site over the course of the next 2 years, where they can explain to you how their work in this is upholding the why. And so I think that's a really great accountability measure to come here and say, hey, we've done this work and this is what it looks like. Because I know that if I came here without good answers, I would be questioned, and that makes me feel very accountable, and I think that's wonderful. Okay, so back to sharing this tab now. So that was relationships. Timing-wise, committee, do I have time to look at one more? Yes? Okay, great. So we're going to look at experiential learning. So again, as I explained, the template is very similar. Repetition is good for all of us as learners. So the why, and now experiential learning. This one was a little bit shocking for our team because we were like, wow, what? There's a lot of blanks. What's happening here? Don't we pride ourselves on? And so we do have programs like the CSC and the ESC for co-op, absolutely. But day to day in every classroom, what does that look like? Our students really benefit from experiential learning. So this learning was actually really great. The team thought, yeah, okay, you know what? We have some work to do. So transit training, absolutely, that's experiential. What's in place to make that sustainable? How are we funding that? Does it need to be funded? Can we partner with people? So there was a lot of great conversations that came out of here. Project search. Field trips, again, are we being intentional with our field trips, or are we doing the same ones we've always done? What is new in our community that's accessible that our students would benefit from learning how to navigate? So a lot of great questions. And then again, we scroll down to, okay, so what? What are you doing with all those points? We are doing these goals. So again, another goal statement, also very similar structure. We will develop the educator's understanding of anti-colonial and anti-oppressive practices to increase the experiential learning opportunities available to students. We will impact our students' ability to engage in experiential learning that reflects their journey towards independence at 21. The educator's actions to achieve this goal will be assessed for implementation and impact over the next 2 years. So the sample educator actions for this, visibly value, is it big up there? Yeah. Visibly value experiential learning by implementing Readtopia to empower student literacy, and therefore opening up more experiential learning opportunities through functional literacy at a minimum. And rollout plan is currently underway. Visibly value experiential learning through educators moving students from the known, what they know they can do, to the unknown, new skills. And so Street Data, a book we've been using quite extensively, really gives us some great instructional strategies for that and at a starting place. So for example, I've even included the pages here. push educators beyond the usual solutions and the curse of knowledge. Sometimes we assume we know, and we know on behalf of the students. And then that prevents us from taking really good risks, appropriate risks, to try new things and introduce our students to new things. And so I loved that concept of the curse of knowledge, because we often want knowledge, but sometimes it can hinder us because we think we know enough. And then implement student, parent, and adult listening sessions to plan for student experiential learning. And again, that comes from street data on page 80, as well as the elements of UDL. Again, I've provided a page, key concept description on page 22 of Learning for All. The monitoring remains the same through all the goals, and the accountability pieces are actually quite similar through all the goals as well. Are there any questions about those two visible values so far, or the goals or educator actions that we've suggested? I will keep moving. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? Is this just another great plan that's going to go on a shelf and nobody's going to do anything with it? No, we've provided a very clear how for implementation. So this slide was shared with schools and brought back to schools by the admin and the CCA and shared in their departments. So it's a 2-year goal. They're going to use a template, which I will show you in a moment. And each team then started with why and shared this presentation to set up the work. Sites then did, or are doing now, depending on what the end of the year looked like last year, an inventory of their foundation. Are we all working from the same understanding of good communication and deliberate staffing? And do we all understand what we mean by visible values? And then sites are picking one thing to focus on, just one of the values or one of the foundations. All the research shows that if you pick too many things, people become overwhelmed with change and revert back. So there are multiple entry points. We have some sites that are struggling with communication, lots of staff changes, admin changes, lots of things that they need to reestablish how they communicate. And then we have some sites who visibly can answer those questions and provide evidence of how they visibly value lots of things. And they found where they're lacking is experiential learning. So that's their entry point. So each site has the ability to do what works for their students and their staff and their needs. We've asked them to identify their measure of success, and we've tasked our administrators with ensuring that CPP is integrated into the SIPs of planning, learning, and implementation. And that way there's all eyes on it. The outside support, we successfully applied for a grant for removing barriers for students with disabilities. So we've actually have $39,000 in outside support that we plan to use for, as an example, mileage reimbursement as teachers go between sites to visit what other sites are doing, which I think is a great networking opportunity and hits that educator to educator column in all 4 values. It also allows us to release teachers to do that without putting pressure on the system, and also purchase relevant materials. So as an example, the 8 pedagogical strategies that are referenced in our educator actions, one of those is knowledge building together. A lot of our students have some mobility issues. So getting up to a whiteboard to work together at the front causes more harm than good because of what it takes, the energy required to get up there. So we are going to purchase individual whiteboards for students so they can work together at their desks without having to move. So small things like that. And we'll use, we've asked sites to tell us what do you think would be helpful, but that's just one example. And then we have system support from all of our departments across the board. So the template, show this tab, is again, this is what schools are working from. What, why, how, which we've already gone over. The visual or the graphic for the values and the foundation. And then they pick one thing to focus on. So it could be this and what you're planning, or it's value relationships, what you're planning, and you can build your goals here at the bottom. All the monitoring and accountability, that's been set. There isn't room for, schools can add more, absolutely, but those pieces are set. But there is room for them to either build on what we provided as an example, or if there's work being done in their school that aligns, to use what is already there. So we feel like it's very manageable and educator friendly in a busy, fast-paced environment. And lastly, second lastly, we wanted everybody in the class on the classroom team. There's lots of people who support CPP, but the target of this learning is who's in the classroom every day. And we really, really want EAs to be included in this. Our educational assistants are with our students the most, and they need to see an entry point for themselves in this learning. So we were very deliberate in making sure, no matter what your area of focus is, your value or anything, here are the pieces you can do on the ground. And we wanted EAs to know that they are a part of that learning. Sometimes they don't have the same release time and whatnot. There's not the same access to extra time for EAs. And so sometimes they feel left behind. And we wanted to make sure that this work, part of that funding release, is to support EAs and any learning we can do for that. So we have provided all the schools with this, so admin and CCAs, can build leadership among all these employee groups here that support our students, but also so everyone has a starting point of like, well, where am I in this work? Well, we all can start with why, right? We can all move students towards independence. All of that is important. And now lastly, the accountability and monitoring for everybody. So I delved into those in the goals. They're listed here on a big slide because this is a presentation that schools also brought back for them, their own teams. And in here, what I want to show you are the prompts for superintendent visits. So ensuring that, it should catch up with me. There's a little bit of, share this tab instead. There we go. A little bit of lag. So the why, because again, all the work starts with why. If we can't answer this question, we're not doing the right work at this time. Questions and look-fors. So what's your focus? I did say to the superintendents, if anybody says all four, they're doing it wrong. It's just one area of focus. That's all. We don't want to overwhelm people. We want this work to be meaningful and to move forward. So there's a link here to what each of those values means. And then some other sample, like what SIPSA goal is tied to your focus? What professional learning has been planned to move staff forward? What resources have been dedicated to that? Because that's a really key question. If we don't dedicate resources, then on the ground in the classroom, that staff is not going to believe this has meaning. And so we really need to dedicate those resources to it. And then for themselves as they walk through, just as a lens, how does what I see and experience today in the classroom uphold the why? Right? So they can answer that for themselves. And if they can't, then that's a bigger question of, okay, what's missing? Where's the disconnect? And then the graphic, because the visual helps a lot of people. Okay, and that is it for me, unless there are questions or comments.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. So I see Melissa has a question.
Hi there. Sorry. I just wanted to say, so as a parent of a student in a CPP program, I would say the startling realization for me looking at that graphic was, yes, 100% the student-to-student relationships between the groups of kids. And I think I'll preface by saying we talk a lot about wanting the kids to gain a sense of independence, and, that's the goal of any CPP program. But there are a subsection of kids that will never gain that sort of independence. There are medically fragile students, there are nonverbal students, there are students that are going to require full care for life. And I would say as a parent of one of those such individuals, it is incredibly isolating to live in this, to have a student in the school system. Like, we're very grateful for everything the school is doing. We have no complaints about the school. It's he's in a safe, welcoming, loving environment, but there isn't enough opportunity to connect with other parents. Yes, there's open house or there's parent interviews, but that is like you happen to pass somebody in the hallway when they're going in for an interview and the other person is not. And I think that's something, as a parent, our kids don't make real friendships. We could sugarcoat it and say, well, everybody in the community really, everybody in the community loves my son. They think he's great. He's lots of fun and he's really happy to be around. But ultimately, he's not making true friendships. What has to happen is that the parents have to facilitate that friendship, like we have to facilitate all aspects of his life. And I feel like the school, because, as you said, we are closely tied with community living, Halton or Burlington or Oakville. doing that, especially in those years post 18, post when they should have graduated, those 3 glorious bonus years we get. That's really the time I think parents need to connect, because we have to be our own problem solvers, and we have to be the ones to facilitate friendships outside of school once school has ended. And so I would just add that, when we look at student to student relationships, to assume that all of these kids can functionally do that on their own, they require either teachers or parents to facilitate that. And I think that's an area that could be improved for sure. That's it.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I have a question. This is obviously great work. I mean, just even having the time to just sit down and really think about this and how each program works. Is this done in other areas? So say, I don't know, the gifted program, the what are they called now? The ARC program. Do staff get an opportunity to sit and reflect like this with some of their other programs? I know you said it'd taken some time to get to this point. Perhaps ARC isn't there yet. But, again, maybe it's for the superintendent.
Yeah, that's a great question. And before I answer that, maybe, Stacey, you want to speak to year 2, what the plan is to take this to the next
So
group.
in year 2, we'd like to reach out and bring our CPE, so the elementary life skills, Community Pathways Elementary now, along with us. So how do we build that bridge to high school and work backwards, and then all sort of have these visible values go through from grade 4 all the way until graduation. We have not done that yet in elementary. This is the first year for this, but that is part of our year 2 plan. Absolutely. And are you speaking to ARC? Okay.
Yeah, and so for some of our other classes like Gifted and ARC, that work is really framed around the SIPSA goals. So every school has a goal around literacy, numeracy, and well-being. And so the work that's invested into really fostering educator practices to improve student achievement in those areas, students in ARC and Gifted would really kind of benefit through that work versus the model that Stacey has rolled out. But it's an exemplary model, I will say. Yeah.
In addition to the SIPSA work for ARC, we have put in knowing that there is no one size fits all, but we need a plan and direction and an entry and exit route for students. So we worked with the teachers and we listened to the students, and we have created a 2-year roadmap that is tentative. It's not prescriptive, but in there is purposeful checkpoints every month on some of those social pieces, the integration pieces, the reading and the math pieces that students are a part of and get to speak to. And so that culture building is in those classrooms. We are rolling that. We sort of ran it by teachers and students last semester, and that'll be rolling out this year as well to also uphold and make sure that SIPSA work has a pathway to follow and check-ins for teachers as well to help build that culture.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody has any other questions or comments? No, I'm going to thank you very much, Stacey, for coming to present that work. As I say, it's very in-depth, and I look forward to hearing from all the different schools on their programs and their progress towards their one goal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now on item 2.2. So last meeting, it was suggested that we set up a subcommittee to review the special education plan standards and provide updates to SEAC on what members should be considering when they review the special education plan. So I'd like to open the floor now for a discussion on how we might like to see this unfold and who might like to be involved. Does anybody have any comments that they'd like to talk about, or any questions or thoughts coming from our last meeting? Amanda.
I'm just curious. I'm sorry. It's been a really long but very short summer. If you could kind of review what exactly this is about so that I can remember. I'm sure once you start talking about it, all those juices will start flowing again, but it's been a minute since we talked, so.
No, that's absolutely fine. So a suggestion was made, I think, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Sarah, but I'm not 100% sure. That perhaps, when we come to review the special education plan, there are 18 standards in there which have to be followed in the development of the special education plan, but really having the time for certain members to have a look at what the legislation says and then report back to SEAC as to what the standard is supposed to be about, so that when we review it, we can see and offer our guidance as to whether we really think HDSB is hitting the spirit and the detail of the standards that we'll put forward. So obviously, with 18 standards, that's a lot of work. And it may be that, perhaps we only look at a few in 1 year, or we look at a couple. I don't know how it's going to look, but the suggestion was that perhaps it would be useful for certain SEAC members, if they wish to get involved, to really kind of dig in and give a short presentation or a brief overview to the rest of the members, so that we're a little bit more informed as to what the special education plan is actually supposed to be covering. Is that your understanding too?
Yes, and I think one of the goals of the intended goals of this process was that we would deepen our knowledge around what's in the standards. So certainly understanding what the expectations are through legislation and the ministry, but also because it's very dense content for people to process in the spring in anticipation of voting in support or not support of the special education plan. There was a hope that we could dive into the standards over the course of the year and have a discussion or an orientation around that standard. And so we talked about different SEAC members taking the lead on a standard each month.
So Kate, was it Kate?
Yeah,
Kate.
I think you mostly just answered my question. So the idea being that, one person each month would pick one of the standards and try and summarize it, digest it to be more understandable for the group as a whole. That's the idea that we're going with here, or?
Yeah, I think that was the suggestion, basically, that rather than all of us coming cold to the special education plan, that we've actually spent some time through the year thinking about what it is that's we want to have in there, getting our understanding, increasing our understanding, basically professional development for us.
Right.
So
can I suggest that we start for next month with one person, and I may be willing to be that person who just highlights what the 18 are, so that people actually are in a position to show interest on a particular one and want to dive into it. Would that be a reasonable start?
Yeah, I'm very happy if you would like to take the lead on this. That would be fantastic. They're covered in the SPED plan, but it would, again, as you say, again, just a brief overview of what each of them are, what they're supposed to cover would be absolutely wonderful, so that people have an opportunity to have an informed decision as to how they would like to be involved. That would be fantastic. So you're okay with that, Catherine?
Yeah, I'm thinking like of the most high level,
Yep.
Yep. I think that's a good place to start. And then if you want to divvy it up into digging into individual sections, I think we could at least prioritize which ones we think we need to understand better, because probably they're not all equal in terms of people's need to know more.
I think that's a wonderful point. So what I suggest that we do then is that we will make some space on the agenda for you next meeting, and you can let us know what you found out, and then we can have a further discussion about how we take that information and learn from it. Does anybody else have any other comments or points that they'd like to add? Well, thank you for volunteering, Catherine.
It's going to be brief. I don't think that's a bad thing here, but
no, that's not a bad thing.
Keep it simple.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So that being done, so we'll put that on the agenda for next meeting. We're now at item 3.0, which is the CEAC discussion and question period. Does anybody have any specific questions or topics they'd like to raise at this point in time? Okay, well, I know it's very early in the year, so we haven't had a lot of time to get back into things. So we will move on to item 4.0, which is communications to CEAC, and we'll start with the superintendent's report.
Yeah, so nice to be back. It has been an excellent start to the school year. I would say one of the smoothest starts that we've had since COVID, so it feels like pre-COVID days and back to the usual swing of things. So it's a really nice feeling. We did have our summer learning and support programs run through the summer again this year. We worked with school programs and Gary Allen, which offers programming in grades 7 through 12, as well as adult education. So we supported their programs with educational assistant resources, but we also offered some of our own programming relating to assistive technology and structured reading intensive sessions, as well as entry to school programs for students with autism. Our student wellbeing department also offered virtual mental health supports. And this year, a new offering was kind of like a well-being camp through Gary Allen that was to develop kind of well-being habits as well as some clinical support attached to the program. So that was also a great success this summer. Our SLPs and our psychoeducational assistants, or consultants rather, did additional assessments through the summer so that we could mitigate some of our wait lists as well. So it was a busy summer for our department. And we also benefited from funding this year again in August to support entry to school transitions. So we were able to have staff from a range of disciplines across departments in schools in the last week of August to meet with families and students to really promote a positive and well-planned return to school for some students. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Does anybody have any questions at this time? Yes, Stacey, yes.
I'm going to comment about summer school. Having been the principal of in-person summer school, The educational assistants we had in our secondary programs were actually invaluable. They supported very specifically in our BTT 101, which is a reach ahead credit for students who use assistive technology, reaching ahead into a grade 9 credit as a way to become very familiar and confident with assistive technology. It's taught by a CERT. One of the teachers, we had, I think, 5 or 6 sections of it. There was a real demand for it. And our EAs were able to support some of the higher needs that we weren't expecting in those classes. And so we were very, that was a different hat, like I had a different hat on for that principalship. And I was very, very appreciative of the support we were able to have because of that funding and that our students had. They earned credit for grade 9 before they even started. So that was wonderful.
That's great. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. As always, life would be so much more difficult without our educational assistants. So I really want to thank them for all the work that they do for us and our students. Okay, so it's now item 4.2. We are moving along in the agenda. Association reports. Are there any reports that any associations have for us at this time? Okay. Again, as we said, it's just the start of the year, so things are just moving forward. So we now move on to item 4.3, the trustees report.
Thank you. Just a quick one this evening. Trustees would like to reiterate our appreciation for SEAC members who participated in the multi-year plan strategic planning exercises that we engaged in the last school year. Work has continued throughout the summer, and we look forward to bringing a plan forward in the fall. So that work will hopefully be finalized, I believe, in November. None of it's possible, and really the multi-year plan is not meaningful without the input of all community members, of which SEAC is a really important one. So just to reiterate, thank you for that, and keep an eye out for the final product. And I think that's it for us this evening, unless Trustee Shang has anything to add. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So we're now at item 4.4, which is the committee reports. So we do have probably has been no work because we've only just got back. I'm just going to ask Kate for the Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy Steering and Advisory Committee. I presume that's not met yet, but...
No. There's usually, I believe there are 4 meetings a year, and I'm not actually sure if we have this year's schedule yet. I need to check my calendar.
Okay, great. Now, one thing I would like to raise for our SEAC members is that I think we need a new representative for Accessibility and Coordinating Committee. I know that Evelyn has had to step back from SEAC, so there is a vacancy for that committee, Accessibility and Coordinating Committee. If anybody would like to become involved in that and to attend the meetings and report back to SEAC, if they could let us know, that would be fantastic, and we'll see if we can get a spot on that committee. So if people want to reach out, they can either do that separately by email or reach out to Colette or myself. That would be great. So we're certainly moving along. We're now at item 5.0, which is the next gender or order paper. We've talked already about the fact that we're going to add some time for Kate to review briefly the standards for the special education plan. Are there any other items that members would like to have added to the agendas coming up in the next few months? Kate.
I brought this up last year. I'm afraid I can't remember which meeting it was, but I would really like to see some standards around parent communications for evaluations and particular diagnoses, because we're finding that the inconsistency of communication with parents from individual schools and CERTs causes a lot of chaos in our parent community, and a lot of inequity in terms of how supported individual families feel, depending on the type of messaging they're getting from their school. And the fact that we don't have a standard way of explaining programming, or if there is, that's not what's being delivered to parents. Let me put it that way. There may be what is supposed to be sort of standard ways of communicating certain things about HDSB programming and identification, but that is not happening consistently from school to school right now. And I would like to see sort of what the guidelines are now on how we standardize wording about programming and identification, I mean specific identifications to parents, what kind of resources we give that are standardized, like written materials in particular around particular identifications and programming, so that we can give the families in HDSB an equitable and accurate experience, which I don't think happens today.
Great, thank you. I think that should be something we can certainly add to an agenda. Like you, I mean, I think one of the things that, we've always been concerned about is IPRC, explaining that to parents and how that's done and whether parents fully understand the differences. So from a Centre for Diverse Learners perspective, I think anything we can do to make sure that everybody gets the same information, I think I would certainly think that would be a valuable use of SEAC time. Anything else that anybody would like to add? There is one thing that I would like to raise, which is that I will be leaving the region by December, end of December, and so we will need to have a new chair, and so I'd just like to again have the opportunity at some point to go through what the role involves. Also, as a SEAC, we need to talk about, or we should talk about, whether we're meeting online or in person. I know the ministry would prefer us to meet in person, but we are a geographically diverse region, and that does make it difficult. And we were just discussing today that in terms of helping people take on the role of a chair, perhaps the requirement to be in person is something that might inhibit who can step forward on that. So we'll certainly add it to an upcoming agenda to talk about what the role is. The changeover takes place in January, so an election for a new chair will have to take place in January. So just want to give people as much information as possible, let you know that it's really not a difficult role, and probably the hardest part of it is actually being here in the building on a Wednesday night. So that's another thing that we'll add. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add to an agenda? Again, you can always email and let me know, and we can certainly bring things up. And again, if there are community organizations that would like to present again on new initiatives that they're doing, we'd be very happy to hear that. Katie.
I think it was maybe the second last meeting last year. I think it was Sophia Siddiqui brought up, we were talking about the end of the year Special Athletics Day, and she had mentioned that it would be something that would be really great for the secondary students as well. I just want to make sure we don't lose that kind of in the chaos of the year, because obviously, if we were to extend that to the secondary students, it would take a fair amount of planning. So I thought it was a great idea, and I'd like to pick it up again to see if that would be something that's possible for them as well.
Yeah, I can certainly bring back some information around what is currently offered, because I believe our secondary schools have a robust inter-school competition on a range of sports. And recently, one of our CPP teams went on to a provincial competition. I forget what sport it was, basketball or. So they do have an inter-school model that looks a little bit different than our one-day event, but I'd be happy to bring information back about the athletics for CPP.
Oh, that'd be awesome. And I guess to continue on that point, I know we had talked, gosh, it wasn't this last season, it was the season before. So the end of 2022, I think that's when I joined. Anyway, 2023. Oh, geez, I don't know. It's all a blur. There had been, I think like as members of SEAC, like most of us have kids who are in some sort of program within the board. And so we see smaller elements of it. I think it would be really great to continue to highlight some of these things. Like I didn't know that there was anything for secondary students. So along that same theme, it would be so great to see some of the things that we might not see as presentations within the board that are maybe kind of not as popular, not as popular is the wrong word, but I think you know what I mean, right? Like some of these things that we do for these kids, because not all parents get a chance to see it. And I think it would be lovely to see kind of a holistic view of special education within Halton.
Sounds great. We'll see what we can bring forward. Does anybody have anything else to add at this point in time? If not, we are at item 6.0. We have made it through our agenda and it is 8:05. I am going to say thank you very much and welcome to our new school year, and we look forward to working with the staff for the benefit of our students, and we'll see you at the next meeting.